You know, when you're dating and all of a sudden you notice maybe their texts are a lot shorter or less flirty, or maybe they stopped initiating dates, or they stopped calling you to chat out of the blue. And when you ask them about it, they insist that everything is okay, and meanwhile, you feel like you're going insane. This is what we call the shift, and today we're going to talk about why it happens and what to do about it. Welcome back to Dating Intentionally. I'm Talia. I'm sharing no nonsense advice for navigating dating and relationships with confidence and ease. Whether you've been dating for a while or you're just getting started, I believe dating can be fun. But you know what's not fun? Experiencing the shift. Luckily, after listening to this episode, you'll always know what to do when you experience it in your dating journey, and you probably will. Before jumping in, I just want to say thank you for listening and a big thank you to all of the listeners who have followed, rated, or reviewed Dating Intentionally. Your support helps me keep this show going and it helps other daters discover it so they can also find the fun in their dating lives. If you haven't already, you can support the show by following, rating, and reviewing wherever you're listening right now. You can also find all of these episodes on YouTube. My channel is just Dating Intentionally. And if you're watching on YouTube right now, you can see Coconut really making herself known in this episode. And as always, you can slide into my DMs on Instagram at dating.intentionally with any dating questions you have. I'm here for you. And speaking of DMs, I got so many messages about this topic we are going to get into today, so let's do it. So, first, we're going to take a closer look at the shift and the different ways it shows up. Then, I'm going to get into what to do about it, how to address it, and you'll hear experiences and stories from other daters that I'll read. So, like I said in my little intro, the shift is when you notice a difference in their behavior for seemingly no reason. Sometimes there is an obvious reason, but a lot of times there isn't, which is why it drives us crazy. And I want to say off the bat that if you feel the shift, you are not crazy. You're not just imagining things. That is real. And I'll share some ways to check in with yourself to see if it's your anxiety or if things have really shifted. But I want to say that a lot of the times, the only reason you're feeling strong anxiety is because of their shift in energy or the shift in your dynamic. Something changed, even when you can't quite put your finger on what that is. Okay, so just in case you have not experienced what I'm talking about, let me give you some examples. So, one example is like texting style. Maybe they're the kind of texter who at first threw in a lot of emojis and gifs and they're flirty and it was very like lively texting. And then suddenly their texts become very dry. No more emojis. It's kind of short, sweet, not flirty, not fun. The energy's kind of gone. That's a very classic example of the shift. Another one would be like maybe they're the kind of person who calls you out of the blue just to say hi and then that stops. Or maybe they were the kind of person who at first they were leading the date planning process and they were super enthusiastic about spending time with you. And then all of a sudden they get super busy and don't have any time to see you. It's like a night and day kind of situation. Whatever it is, it's going to be a very noticeable shift in energy, enthusiasm, interest, and it feels like they no longer care. I'm talking mostly about the shift in early dating, but this can happen months or years into a relationship. I heard from a woman on Instagram in my DMs who had her boyfriend fully ghost her after 9 months of being in a committed relationship. But then before that, before he ghosted her, she did notice a shift where he would just not answer her texts for days when she was trying to make plans with him. And 9 months into a committed relationship, that's not the norm, right? There's no reason to not text each other for days and days, and making plans should be pretty fluid at that point. Any abnormality or inconsistency, especially in communication, is probably going to make you feel unsafe, uncertain, and maybe even feel a sense of dread, like something really bad is going to happen. And it's normal to feel that way. But it makes taking action on this even harder, like knowing what to do, because you're now worried that if you do or say the wrong thing, you'll scare them off and you won't even be able to talk it through. It's not a good position to be in, and it really sucks. So I have two quick shares for you, my experience with the shift. And the first one is like the classic shift that I experienced with the first guy I dated when I got back into dating after my big breakup. And, we had gone on a few dates and we had hooked up twice. And we had been talking for 2 or 3 weeks. And I could tell something was off because we had a date, we hooked up. Then after that, the texting was totally different. It went from very active texting to very quiet. And then he was like going on a camping trip, and, I could tell something was off. And then after the trip, he came back and was like, hey, it was great getting to know you, but someone, a friend or an ex came back into his life. There was just some other woman of interest in his life. And at least he told me, at least I got clarity in that situation, because a lot of times you're not going to have that with the shift. A lot of times, and we'll get into why, you won't get a reason why their energy changed, but at least I did in that situation. Another version of the shift is when you are a little deeper into a relationship. And this is where it gets a little confusing, because there is a point after the dating phase, after the early dating phase and the courting phase, where you go from newly dating to more committed. And the texting will slow down. The lovey-dovey stuff might fade a bit because you're already in an established relationship and you're likely seeing more of each other. That is normal. That's not a bad sign. It's not necessarily a sign that someone's pulling away. And I experienced this with my husband for sure. I remember feeling this way about 4 to 5 months in after we were official, and the emotional rush of that happening died down, and we started to fall more into a routine. This shift happened after we had said I love you to each other and we were seeing each other more frequently. And I knew that there wasn't something up or something bad happening, because his actions were still showing me how much he was into me. He was very consistent in making plans. He called me many times a day just to chat, but he was noticeably less verbally affectionate at a certain point, and it took me a while to get used to it. And that was a shift. It went from that new relationship energy, super sweet on each other and just being very lovey-dovey, and I have the text to prove it, I have the receipts, to just a more toned down version of that. And that is a shift as well. And I think a lot of us go through that shift when we go from the newly dating, new relationship energy phase to that more established relationship phase. It's tough. Let's talk about the reason why this happens. The reason behind the shift is usually valid. More often than not, you're feeling the shift in early dating because they're either not sure about how they feel and don't know what to say, or they do know how they feel and they're scared to say something that will hurt you. Those are usually the reasons why the shift is happening. It's like they feel a certain way or they don't know how they feel because they're not used to getting into their emotions, and they don't know how to communicate it or don't want to because they're scared. And sometimes life happens, and that's what causes them to pull back. Maybe an ill family member that needs care, or job loss, or something at work that really does suck up more of their energy. Maybe it's an injury or a surgery or a medical condition, something to do with their studies if they're in school, or their kids if they have children. Or maybe they have a chronic illness that's flaring up, mental health issues, their pet got sick. There are so many things that can take someone's attention and energy away. And when that's poorly communicated, it will cause you to feel that anxiety that comes with a shift. Like if you're dating someone and everything was going great and all of a sudden something in their house like broke, like a pipe burst or something happened with their roof that needs their immediate attention, and they can't give you the normal attention they normally be giving you, you would understand that if that was properly communicated. But imagine something happened in their life that is pulling their energy away. So they're acting like they're like distracted, but they're not saying why. Your mind is going to go to the worst case scenario, which is, oh my God, they don't like me anymore, right? Or, oh gosh, they're hiding something. There's someone else. Something's happening that has to do with our relationship. But a lot of times it doesn't have to do with you. It truly is work, life, family, kids, school, something that's external to your relationship. And they're not doing a good job of setting the expectations of what they're able to give you in that moment. And that's why the shift is happening. So you might be wondering, can we avoid the shift? I want to say no. Sometimes a shift is not avoidable, with one major exception and one minor exception, so two. But let's get into the major one, and that is a shift in frequency of communication. So if you just met someone and the texting is heavy, like you're talking a lot, you're sending pictures and memes, and you're just in contact very frequently, you are likely going to see a shift in communication down the line, because it's impossible to keep that up. That level of communication is not sustainable in a long-term relationship. And I know that's hard to hear, but we have to realize how addicted we get to the dopamine that comes with all that texting. And that's why the shift feels so horrible when it happens. But it's going to happen, especially if you're texting a lot and then you keep dating. It's not sustainable. It's going to die down. This is one of the many reasons I say to keep texting at a minimum in early dating, because it's better to ramp that up as you get to know someone than have to tone things down to keep it sustainable, because then you're feeling like you're already losing something. So you can avoid the shift in texting if you start off slower and focus on your in-person or real-time interactions. Now, the minor exception in the shift, and I wouldn't say this is like something you can avoid, but something to be aware of, is when it comes to travel, right? We also see the shift when, let's say you're dating someone, it's been a month, and they go away for like 10 days. Maybe it's a business trip, maybe it's to visit family or a vacation or a bachelor trip, whatever. And they go from being able to text you frequently, there's a routine maybe that's been established, and then their routine changes because they're away. You can't expect them to stick to that routine when they're away. They're distracted, they're in a different environment, they're not in their routine anymore, they're trying to connect with the people that they're traveling with or the place they're traveling to, and they're not focused on their phone. So I'm not saying you can avoid this shift, but I want to be aware of it because it's going to happen when you or they travel. And it doesn't mean that your relationship is doomed. It doesn't mean they don't like you anymore. It just means they are on a trip and they're focused on that and they're less focused on texting you. And that is okay. That is very normal behavior. We don't have to read into that. So those are two kind of like, and I wouldn't say exceptions, just two like little asterisks when it comes to the shift. And outside of that, I don't think you can really avoid it. And I also think that that's a good thing. I think the shift is ultimately a good thing. Even though it is uncomfortable to sit through, it's an opportunity to see how you communicate together and if you can tackle a conflict together and how that works. Like I said earlier, the shift happens when someone's actions have changed and they're showing up differently than they have in the past, but their words aren't acknowledging it, right? They're pulling away, like pretend like everything's normal or like play it off. They're changing their actions without communicating to you verbally that something's going on, whether it does or does not have anything to do with you. I don't think that this behavior is desirable or acceptable. Like, I don't think someone not communicating with you about something is okay, but I do want to offer some grace here because one, feelings are hard. It is hard. We all have different capabilities when it comes to understanding, navigating, and being in tune with our emotions. I wish all of us were masters at this, but we're just not. We're just absolutely not. So again, I'm not saying makes it okay, but we have to acknowledge that emotions are just very messy and difficult and hard to figure out sometimes especially for some people out there dating. And the second thing is that communication and confrontation is hard. So even if you know how you're feeling, sometimes just being able to say that out loud to someone is extremely difficult. And it's easier to just not and just pretend like nothing's wrong and not face it and sweep it under the rug and pretend it's not a thing. I mean, that's kind of why ghosting is a thing. It's easier just to disappear than it is to say, hey, you know what, this connection isn't for me, because a lot of people out there dating don't want to let you down. They're scared of being the bad guy. And again, I'm not saying it makes it okay, but that's what's going on here beneath the surface. And it really sucks that you have to be on the other side of that, especially if you're someone who is very attuned and aware and willing to have these conversations, right? If you're the person who's willing to talk about it and work on it, it's frustrating to be with someone who is ignoring it. So, yeah, I'm not saying you should accept zero verbal communication about something that is clearly affecting you, but I'm just pointing out there are skills required to be able to navigate this and come out on the other side with clarity. And in some cases, you might even feel closer to this person. And ultimately, that's what you want, clarity, right? I want to share a few stories I got on Instagram about the shift and people's different experiences with this and what they did. All right, here's the first one. I've been dating a guy for 2 months. I felt a shift in his energy around 1 month. I waited it out and he was still communicating, just less, and there was less substance. We weren't hanging out as much. It was hard to tell if it was my anxiety or him. Now I definitely think it was him, but he still was doing a lot right and showing interest. I brought it up, expressed what I'm looking for because we hadn't talked about relationship goals yet. And when he said he's also looking for a long-term relationship, I expressed my expectations. Next time we hung out in person, he brought up if I wanted to talk about anything else, which is a green flag. Since I mentioned it, he has been all in. He's owned it, gave me some valid reasons, expressed some fears. But now things are going absolutely amazing, and he's wonderful. The lesson was speak up. I also want to throw in here, I referenced your post as I was debating what to do. You had a few that were really helpful as I navigated if he was really pulling away and what I should do next. So thank you. I love hearing that. And I wanted to share this example because it worked out, right? This person noticed a shift in the other person's energy. He was communicating just less frequently and wasn't as much substance. And so she called it out. He opened up. See, he matched her energy and her vulnerability in the situation. When you call someone out gently, again, respectfully, you are being vulnerable. You're saying, hey, I'm noticing this, and this is how I'm feeling. And I want to talk about it. If you meet someone who can match you in that, that's amazing. That's where all the magic can happen, right? So I love that. I also want to acknowledge that there will be times in your dating journey when you meet someone and this happens and you have the opportunity to talk something out and they'll surprise you, right? This is a risk. Calling someone out, calling it out when you feel the shift, it is a risk, but it's a risk worth taking because on the other side of that risk, you will learn everything you need to know about how they can communicate. Can they be vulnerable and share what they're going through? In this case, they mentioned fears and reasons that this person thought were valid, or are they going to shut down and run away? You only will know that if you bring it up. Here's another positive story. About 6 to 7 weeks in, I felt the enthusiasm wasn't the same, and communication between dates those weeks seemed less. My old self would have jumped straight to ego and matched their energy, but I decided to continue showing up with the energy and effort I had been putting in and wanted to see if it was reciprocated. I brought it up next time we were on the date, what I had previously enjoyed, what I had noticed and felt in those 2 weeks. The response I got made me feel secure to continue having those conversations. I'm still a work in progress, but I would have never approached it this way prior to dating intentionally. Thank you. This also is great. I what I love about this one is that when you experience this shift, you get to choose to act differently than you would have acted in the past. This person mentioned her old self. My old self would have, turned my effort down. I would have done less to match their lower energy. But instead of doing that, she continued to show up the way she wanted someone to show up for her and communicated with him about how she was feeling. And then he matched her energy. Again, when you call someone out and when you acknowledge the shift, you give them a chance to match your energy. Be like, you know what, actually, like, I'm sorry you felt that way, and I want to do it differently too, right? You need to give them that chance. And then I got another message about someone's experience regarding the shift. And this was an interesting point that I'm glad this person brought up. So I had asked on Instagram, have you ever felt the shift? How did it play out? And this person wrote, yes. As someone who grew up in an abusive household, I'm hyper aware of other people's energy because I had to learn how to navigate even the most subtle shifts in energy from as early as 5 years old. My partner does not share the same trauma, and so sometimes he doesn't understand that when I pick up on even a mild shift in energy, it can cause me to have a hypersensitive reaction. Now, this is something I'm working on in therapy, and I absolutely own this as my own issue, but shifts in energy can be especially challenging for those of us with that kind of trauma. And I wanted to share this because it's a great point. If you've grown up in an abusive household, or even in a household where your caregivers weren't good at emotional regulation, which is the kind of household I grew up in, you've learned to be hyper vigilant of other people's emotional states for your own safety. And that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow if that's something you've gone through and you're just kind of now realizing, like, oh man, like, I've been so aware of other people's emotions just to protect myself. And it makes sense when you're a kid and you're trying to survive, but as adults, we're all responsible for managing our own emotions. But it's hard to stop that habit. I also, with my husband and in my past relationship, was that partner who, like, not every 5 seconds, but frequently would be like, are we good? Are you good? Are we okay? Are you mad? Is something wrong? At any shift in energy. And usually whatever they were going through had nothing to do with me. Usually it's just like people have ups and downs. People have moods. They have other things in their life. It's not all about me. So I'm glad this person brought this up because it's something worth thinking about when it comes to the shift. You might be extra sensitive to a shift in someone's energy because of how you were brought up. And that's just something to be aware of. All right, so we know the shift is a thing. We know why it happens, but what do we do about it? Let's talk about it. Because when this happens, like, you might not know how long to wait to call something out or how to ask if something's wrong or what to ask. And you don't want to look desperate and you don't want to be pushy, but at the same time, you want to show interest and trying to figure out what's going on. So the first step is reflecting, right? Let's just zoom out and think about whether or not there is something in their life that you know of that maybe pulling their energy away from you. Like, are they dealing with something else that maybe they've mentioned in conversation that they're dealing with that maybe makes them less attentive? That would be the first thing to think about because, again, you don't want to go to the place mentally and emotionally where you're like, oh my God, they're pulling back because they don't like me. It's probably not that. It really could be something else in their life. So let's just do like a reality check. And in that reality check, we're also going to think, okay, is this a shift or am I just expecting a little bit more frequent communication? When it comes to communication, this is tough because we want consistency. And when I say consistency, I don't mean frequency. Consistency can be like, oh, they text me every 24 hours. Like every morning, I get a text from them. It's not frequent. Like, that's not what I would call frequent necessarily, but it is consistent. Sometimes we have to do a reality check like this. Like, okay, we had our date Sunday night. It is now Tuesday morning, and I haven't heard from them. Is that a crazy long time to not hear from someone after a date and maybe a really busy Monday with a lot going on? No, it's not. Maybe this is just a sign you really want to hear from them. Maybe this is just a sign you're excited about them. It doesn't mean they're pulling away necessarily. So, again, this first step is about reflection and really zooming out and focusing on the facts and staying grounded in that. And then from there, we can decide if there's evidence of a shift, right? Or not. Sometimes it really just is you're very excited about this connection and you want to hear more from them. And that's all. And it's not really a shift. The next step, let's just say it is a shift and you are noticing a noticeable difference in their behavior. You will call it out. Okay, this is so when I say call it out, I'm not talking about an aggressive, attacking way. I just mean in a calm, gentle way. So, one of my favorite methods for this is from one of my previous guests in the podcast, Erica Etten. She is at A Little Nudge on Instagram. And one of her phrases that she likes to use is, I can't tell. So, you can kind of send a text and be like, based on our communication, I can't tell if you're still interested in getting to know each other. I can't tell if you're still interested in dating. I can't tell if you're still available, whatever it is. But that I can't tell is great because, again, it focuses on you, the I can't tell. And you are opening up about what you're experiencing without kind of accusing them of anything. Like, you disappeared on me, you ghosted, you went away, you whatever it is. Like, no, I can't tell if you're still interested in getting to know me based on our texting. It's also direct, it's not emotional, and it's kind of just opening up the floor for a conversation. And then an example of a text that I used to send would be like, I'm noticing a shift in energy since our last date. Has anything changed on your end? Right? You say, again, I'm noticing, I'm observing this. This is something I am experiencing. And then you ask a question, a very straightforward question. Has anything changed on your end? And then the third step is knowing what to do when they respond. So if they don't respond at all, you have your answer. If you send a text, if you call it out and they completely shut down, ghost you, run away, whatever, then you know, okay, that was how they felt about that. They did not want to talk about it. They were not interested in having a conversation. They're not ready for a conversation. And if they're not ready for that conversation, they're not ready for a relationship. End of story. Or they might come back to you with reasons or excuses, depending on how you want to look at it. They can say, oh, work, kids, whatever it is. And then you can go from there. And that's your opportunity to be like, you know what? I prefer to see each other once a week. Can you do that right now? Right? Like, give them something very specific that you're looking for. The more specific you are, the better, because then they can really tell you honestly if they can meet you there, if they can match that energy, if they have the capability and the bandwidth in their life to do that. So whether it's more texting or you just want to see them more often or whatever it is, be as specific as possible. Also, if you call it out, and the third type of response you might get is like, they're going to respond, but they'll kind of just be like, I am what I am. Like, some guy might say, I'm just not a good communicator. That's a red flag. That's someone who's saying, I am who I am, and they're not even willing to try to make any small adjustment or meet you at all. Like, that's just a hard no at that point, honestly. All right, here's another example I have from a listener. So we had 3 fun dates within 3 weeks, and we usually only texted once a day to check in or make plans, and it felt like a good slow pace. Upon asking for the fourth date, I got the quote, should be free, I'll check my schedule, I'll let you know. Felt like something was off, but I tried to tamp down my typical rejection sensitivity and anxiety, especially after a couple of days with no follow up. I checked in and asked how it's going 3 days later, and I got the so busy, crazy work, my AC broke. Eye roll. Still attempting to assume positive intent and not make it about my own reaction. So I let him know I had fun on our past dates, and I asked him to let me know when things settle if he wants to go out again. And I got a oh for sure I will. And he kept up the conversation for a few days, then it dropped off completely. I sent a close the loop message after it had been 2 weeks since our last date, and our last messages were 3 days apart. I probably could have let it go and not said anything, but I would rather be practicing my communication skills even if other people don't, especially when it's someone you spent a total of 10 hours with over 3 dates rather than just 1 to 2 brief dates and a mutual not reaching out. I love this. I love that this person took the shift and turned it into an opportunity to practice communication, even though she definitely knew it wasn't going to go anywhere at that point. And this is just a really good example of giving yourself closure. So I want to read the text that she sent and we can kind of go through it. So she wrote, again, this is her last text to him, her close the loop text. Hey there. So I'm going to take the energy shift as disinterest at this point rather than only being busy. Maybe I should have read between the lines in the first place, but I try to take people at their word rather than assume. It would have been helpful to know up front if there was no intent to follow through on meeting again rather than being left in vague limbo. No reason needed, just clarity. As difficult as it can be, direct communication is really important to me. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Either way, I did enjoy the time, and it's rare to find fun, respectful people I feel comfortable with. I hope things are going well for you. So, this text I think is really good. It's a little long, but it gets the point across of like, I'm closing the loop. This behavior isn't working for me. Here's why. I value communication. I wish you the best. Great. And like he didn't respond to this text, but sometimes this is all you need. This is the clarity you need. You can give it to yourself. All right. I want to thank everyone who submitted their DMs to me to read on the show. We had permission to read all of those, by the way. And I hope that this helped you if you are dealing with the shift right now or worried about it when it comes up. I'm not going to promise you, but I'm pretty sure it will come up eventually because it's such a common thing in dating. And if you have any questions about this, please reach out to me on Instagram at dating.intentionally. I am more than happy to answer your questions. I'm your dating cheerleader. I'm here for you. And that's really all I have for you today. If you were watching this on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed the new setup. I am taking a page out of my own book and trying to record while putting less pressure on myself because when I put too much pressure on myself, I stop having fun, just like with dating. So, and I'm trying to be a little more chill. I switched up my setup for today just to kind of break out of my routine. We have Coconut here next to me doing her whole grooming routine while I'm recording, which has been interesting. Yeah, I appreciate you for watching if you're on YouTube. And of course, I appreciate you for listening. And I'd love it if you would share this episode with someone who is navigating dating and might need a little help along the way. And if any of these episodes have helped you in your journey, you can help me by leaving a stunning review on Apple or giving Dating Intentionally 5 stars on Spotify. I'd really appreciate it. Once again, I'm Talia. This has been Dating Intentionally, and I'll see you next time.